Hello, Psychonauts. Today I want to talk about the 1968 Beatles film, Yellow Submarine. It's this movie right here, and it's a great movie to watch while tripping, but I think it might be more than that. I think this movie might act as a psychedelic guide. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, I'm going to be basing some of these ideas off of this book right here, The Psychedelic Experience, a manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead by Timothy Leary, Ralph Metzner, and Richard Alpert. So we're going to be using that. So what I mean is, I think this movie gives very specific cues that sort of guide or maybe nudge the watcher of this movie into a deeper psychedelic experience. First of all, I'm going to start off with a quote from this book. If the participant can be made to see and to grasp the idea of the empty mind as soon as the guide reveals it, that is to say, if he has the power to die consciously and, at the supreme moment of quitting the ego, can recognize the ecstasy which will dawn upon him then and become one with it, all game bonds of illusion are broken asunder immediately. The dreamer is awakened into reality simultaneously with the mighty achievement of recognition. So, the psychedelic guide is supposed to reveal the idea of the empty mind. And that's exactly something that this movie does. There are more parts of this book that I will be referencing, but that's one of the main things that I need to lay out before we get into this movie. So, the movie starts off in Pepperland. It's in unearthly paradise, that's what they call it. There's classical music playing, and the animation is really playful and simple, and I think it makes you feel really good, especially if you're watching this movie while tripping. If you're coming up, I feel like it gives you a comforting, calming vibe. But then we're introduced to the movie villains, the Blue Meanies, and they hate everything good, and they hate music, and, you know, they're just there to disturb the peace of Pepperland. And the Beatles will later come to save the day. That's sort of the main premise of this movie. Now, there's some musical sequences. There's a lot of Beatles music in this movie, which is great if you're a Beatles fan like I am, because familiar music that you love is great while tripping. But the part that I really want to get into is when we're first introduced to the Beatles. The first Beatle we're introduced to is Ringo, and we follow him through some more playful cartoon plot, and we get to John. Now, this is where I think things really start to get interesting, and this is where the first cue is for the watcher. So Ringo wakes up John, and eventually there's a captain that they're with in the background. There's this captain character that they're with, and he goes, "What do you think?" And John's face goes kind of like, I can describe it as an aha face, and he kind of goes like, and I think this cue is really subtle, and honestly I wouldn't interpret it as anything if it weren't for the later cues that I found in the rest of the movie. But it's sort of like a aha, and if you're in that state of mind, you might take notice of your empty mind. Like, you don't have all these thoughts constantly running through your head. The what do you think, you know, maybe normally you'd start thinking, but your mind is silent in a way that you take notice of. So this is the first time that happens. So we get to our other Beatles. They go and find George. George is in like some psychedelic meditation room, and like Tomorrow Never Knows, the beginning of that song, is playing. So kind of some trippy visuals, and George is just great. He's George, and he ends up saying things like, it's all in the mind. He gets in a cartoon car, and he's driving it back and forth, and it's changing colors, and John is trying to say, you know, oh, the car is red with orange wheels, or it's green with yellow wheels. I don't know exactly, but George goes, it's all in the mind. This is another thing, and I'm going to find the part in the book. The experienced person will be able to maintain the recognition that all perceptions come from within, and will be able to sit quietly controlling his expanded awareness like a multi-dimensional television set. Okay, so, and this is what George says. He says it's all in the mind. So we're reminding that all perceptions come from within. we get to Paul, and this is where we're about to get to our second cue. So the captain is talking again, and he's saying, you know, oh, there'll be rough seas ahead. What do you think? Waves upon waves pounding over. What do you think of that? And the Beatles are responding, they're going, oh, well, I think, and then they finally go, as a matter of fact, I've forgotten. And I think this is another cue about the empty mind, but this is also something very specific to acid. And you know the feeling, if you know the feeling, it's sort of that your thoughts are being erased behind you. Like you forget the moment previous as soon as the new moment is here, you know? So I think at this part of the movie, if you're watching while tripping, you'll definitely connect those dots together. And this is the part where, at least in the first time I watched this, I started to feel like the movie was on to me. And I know that's a bit paranoid, but I do think that there is specific things that were purposely put in this movie, so I don't think it's too far off to think that they knew that people would watch this under the experience of mind-altering drugs. Anyway, so the next part that I think is really interesting is when we get to the song Only a Northern Song, and I have to say, visually, things get weird. There's a lot of optical effects with like negative images of the Beatles and like a cube that's red and green and kind of doing a spinning around, like there's like an optical illusion, impossible color thing. And there's just some weird visual effects going on. And Only a Northern Song is playing. And this is one of the most underrated Beatles songs, I think. It is clearly one of their most psychedelic songs. So like the beginning of the lyrics go, if you're listening to this song, you may think the chords are going wrong, but they're not. He just wrote them like that. When I first watched this, I felt that this movie was speaking to me. I thought that they knew I was on acid. I know that that's, you know, obviously it's not true in the strict sense, but this movie really plays with the psychedelic mind. This part of the movie honestly can feel like you're being initiated into something. It's that strange. There's actually kind of a conspiracy online. I don't know if I'd call it that, but there's at least a post. I think it's on, I'm not sure where it's on, but there's a post about that there's a hidden movie inside Yellow Submarine that you can only see while on acid, which obviously is not something I would believe, and I'd be very skeptical of that, but it's also kind of interesting, and the claim is that there's a completely different movie that you can only see under the effects of LSD, which I think is really far-fetched. But what I don't think is far-fetched is that you really do see a different movie than what you were seeing while you're sober. Now, it might not be specifically designed and engineered that you see a specific other movie, but I do kind of agree with the idea that you see another movie and you unlock a hidden movie, and that's kind of what I'm going for here. You unlock this sort of psychedelic guide movie that's guiding you through the experience. And Only a Northern Song is going to be the peak of this experience. So the last part of the lyrics go, if you think the harmony is a little dark and out of key, you're correct, there's nobody there. And this, I think, is what is supposed to lead you into the realization that is ego death, or, you know, at least severe ego dissolution, where you sort of realize that at least the self that you think you are doesn't really exist, and you know, you have the power to die consciously and quit your ego. After this, I think I'd consider the next stages of the movie to align with the stages of the psychedelic experience after the peak, after ego loss, and then you're gonna go into the stages where you start trying to, your mind starts maybe trying to piece things back together. I'm gonna do a part 2 video for the movie after Only a Northern Song, so after the sort of, what I would say the peak of the experience is. So that's gonna be in a part 2 video. I will be back with the second part, hopefully very soon.